There is no question that the return of Fernando Alonso to F1 in 2021 with the rebranded Alpine Racing Team has drawn a mixture of responses from F1 fans. Some were excited, some were horrified, and some were just left plain confused as to why he was returning to F1 in the first place. This mixture of responses from F1 fans is pretty much the norm when it comes to Fernando Alonso, who is still one of the most passionate, controversial, and in some cases hated drivers in F1. But how does Alonso's comeback compare to the arguably even more controversial comeback of Michael Schumacher back in 2010? So, let's first of all talk about Michael Schumacher, and I want to try and build a little bit of a timeline of what happened and when until his final retirement from F1. So, let's begin in a strange way at the end, or at least the first end as we know it now, when Michael Schumacher announced his retirement from F1 whilst he was still at Ferrari all the way back in 2006.
To make it short in a way, at the end of this year, I've decided together with the team that I'm going to retire from racing. I really loved every single moment of the good and the bad ones. Those ones make life so special.
In his final season for Ferrari, Michael actually had a competitive car, and the 2006 World Championship went down all the way to the final race of the season in Brazil. And although Michael ended up losing the title in the last race, in the end, what did he really need to prove? I mean, the man was a 7-time world champion, 2 more times than the next closest driver, Juan Manuel Fangio, and in that season he pushed his records even further, achieving his 68th pole position in Magny-Cours and then his 91st win at the Chinese Grand Prix. Oh, and by the way, as for who Michael lost out to in the title decider, it was a young Spaniard by the name of Fernando Alonso, who had just won his second and back-to-back world title. Now, in truth, although Michael was now out of the driver's seat, in reality, he never really left either Formula One or, more importantly, Ferrari. In 2007, he was still working at the team in an advisory role to Jean Todt, who had been promoted to CEO, and on top of that, he also attended several races throughout the 2007 season, but not as a Formula One fan, but as part of the Ferrari team and sometimes even being part of their pit wall. And finally, he wasn't even completely out of the car either. He even drove the 2007 car in October at Fiorano for the first time since his retirement, and then in a formal test in Jerez to help the team develop the car for the 2008 season. The man just could not be kept away from anything with an engine. He even famously, on his time away from F1, also rode Ducati sport bikes, having a few 135-mile-per-hour crashes apparently, as well as some success in a few amateur races. So, riding bikes, testing Ferrari F1 cars, racing on track, you could easily describe Michael Schumacher as almost an addict, and F1 was his drug. Even though he was out of the sport, he just kept coming back for more. And then, of course, the news exploded in the world of F1 of a possible return after Felipe Massa's accident during qualifying at the 2009 Hungarian Grand Prix, which would see the Brazilian miss out the rest of the season. The news that Michael Schumacher could come back for the remainder of the 2009 season spread like wildfire, and Ferrari immediately tested Schumacher in a modified 2007 car to prepare him for his return. Unfortunately, he was still recovering from a neck injury that he had sustained from a bike crash earlier on in the year, and sadly the return was called off by Ferrari due to safety concerns. However, that was it. Just like that, Michael Schumacher had gotten a taste of a comeback, and in his mind, he was ready.
A very early Christmas present. I'd like to introduce Michael Schumacher.
So, Michael was back in F1, and as expected, it sent the F1 world into meltdown. Fans, journalists, and drivers alike were speculating what he would be capable of on his return. Would he be like the Michael of old and maybe even add another title onto his 7? Unsurprisingly, it was the talking point going into the 2010 season, and it's fair to say that the huge excitement and expectation of his return was equally matched by both criticism and skepticism as well.
I didn't get a proper shot at that question, so I'm going to interject
You'll get your
here.
chance
I'm going to say what I need to say.
Worry.
If I was his father, I would have said to him, son, why? Why? 7 times world champion. He must be out of his mind. In life, you, as an individual with that sporting legacy, you have to give your sport up, not the sport give you up, and he's putting himself in that position. He's becoming into a situation where he could become a sad, rejected man if he gets whipped. He won't get whipped because he's that good. Can he win a race? Yes.
Title?
Why should he do it? He's mad. Title, not a hope.
However, make no mistake, this was no publicity stunt and Michael wasn't coming back to just make up the numbers. He wanted to win, and in the back of his mind, he wanted to win championships. Although he tried to subvert expectations, coming back with Mercedes, the team who only the year before had won both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship with Jenson Button as brawn, it was clearly a sign that he was serious about his comeback. However, his return to F1 in the end turned out to be more of a blip in his legacy rather than the huge success story he probably wanted. He was beaten by his younger teammate Nico Rosberg in each of the 3 seasons they were together, and it was Nico who delivered the team's first win in China in 2012, along with 5 podiums and 1 pole position. In terms of the big highlights, Michael did manage a podium with Mercedes at Valencia in 2012 and even set one of the most emotional pole positions in F1 history in Monaco of that year. Sadly, that pole lap was taken away as Michael had a grid penalty from a collision with Bruno Senna from the race before, but seeing Schumacher set the pole lap to this day is one of the first memories of F1 I had, and it showed that the old man still had the speed all the way until the end.
I've decided to retire by the end of the year, although I'm still able and capable to compete with the best drivers that are around. But at some point, it's good to say goodbye, and it might this time even be forever.
The announcement of his second retirement came as no surprise as Michael Schumacher was coming towards the end of his 3-year contract with Mercedes, and although he could definitely compete with the other drivers on the grid, I think it was a good time to walk away, and this time hopefully he had no regrets. So, looking back and knowing what happened, it's impossible not to draw some comparisons between the return of Michael Schumacher in 2010 and now the return of Fernando Alonso in 2021. There's no doubt that the biggest similarity between the two is simply their love for the sport. They just can't seem to get away from it, but no doubt that Fernando has come back with arguably a few more years left on the clock, being only 39 when he makes his return, whilst Michael Schumacher was 41 when he made his return in 2010. Clearly, both drivers were also remotivated by the teams they joined. Mercedes were coming off the back of a title as the Brawn team, and even Renault have looked like they've made some serious gains in 2020 and arguably are the 3rd or 4th best team on the grid at the moment. However, many people might be wondering what's the real reason behind Fernando's return, and why would he potentially want to put himself all over again through the same pain that he experienced at McLaren. This is the biggest difference between Michael and Fernando, because Michael at the end of 2004 just came off the back of 5 straight titles and his record 7th. The talks of is he the greatest of all time or not were pretty much a foregone conclusion, and going into 2005 and 2006, in his own words, this is how he felt.
It certainly makes me a better driver than I was by the end of 2.5 and 2.6. This no doubt, because already I was kind of empty and tired, but it's to be found out.
So after being mentally drained, after a career that had produced 68 pole positions, a record at the time, 91 wins, another record, and 7 world titles, yep, you guessed it, another record at the time, what did he really have left to prove? In Fernando's case, the McLaren years in the back end of his career had not left him mentally drained, they'd left him mentally frustrated at how he as a driver was being perceived in F1. Looking back at his time at McLaren, in his 4 seasons at the team alongside world champion Jenson Button and Stoffel van Dorn, Fernando scored 132 out of the team's 195 points over the course of 4 years. That means that Fernando Alonso single-handedly scored 68% of the team's total points over the course of this period. Now, that number is just insane to me, and it genuinely shocked me when I saw it. But what's even more crazy is that we all remember how bad and how notorious McLaren were for their reliability during the Honda days, but Fernando quite literally in 4 seasons had more retirements than he did top 10 finishes in the points, with 25 points finishes and 30 retirements over the course of 4 years. And that's the thing, even when you look at his last season in 2018, after the first 5 races he was actually best of the rest in the championship until the development of the car took an absolute nosedive, and he even managed to whitewash his teammate in qualifying for the second time in his career. Fernando wasn't exactly a man past his prime and ready to retire because he's not good enough anymore. He was a man stuck in a dead end, and no one was looking at his achievements and praising it as an amazing end to a great F1 career.
This year, a couple of months ago, I decided that it was the right time because I feel strong, I feel driving a good level, and I want to say bye-bye to this sport when I feel strong. Right now, I'm thinking that it's a goodbye, but you know, life changed very quickly. When we announced the retirement, is to leave the door open because, as I said, for me it's a bye-bye, but who knows in the future.
Fernando felt like he needed to prove to the people that he wasn't just some driver, and he wanted to prove that he was an all-time great, and when given a good car, that he was a winner. That's the major difference between Fernando's comeback and Michael's. Michael had nothing to prove when he left, whilst Fernando has always felt like he was leaving with everyone doubting him and not giving him the respect that he deserved. And this is why, whilst Michael was busy riding bikes for fun and still trying to work for Ferrari, Fernando left F1 with a point to prove. Since 2018, Fernando has won back-to-back races at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, first in 2018 and then in 2019. He then went on to win the 2018-19 season of the FIA World Endurance Championship, and to add to the list of prestigious endurance races, in 2019 he also won the famous Daytona 24 Hour as well. Even in 2020, he was back in the car and raced in the Indy 500 with less success, and even in the Dakar Rally. And although he didn't win, he did come 13th out of 58 drivers in his class and finished as the highest placed rookie on the field. The amazing thing is that when you actually look at what he's achieved in his 2-year break from F1, all of those achievements could literally be the entire career of any amazing racing driver. But to Fernando, it really does seem more like validation that he is still one of the fastest and most versatile drivers on the planet. So, will Fernando Alonso's comeback be a success? Well, only time will tell, and it also really depends on how you define the word success when looking at where Renault are now in 2020 and what they could potentially be capable of in the future. I think few, however, would categorize Schumacher's comeback at Mercedes as a success because of what he had achieved when he left the first time. In fact, with all of the Schumacher-Hamilton GOAT debates recently, it's funny that people very smartly avoid talking about Schumacher's time at Mercedes and what impact that had on his overall legacy. But in the case of Fernando Alonso, what legacy did he really leave in the back end of his career with McLaren Honda and then McLaren Renault, and what legacy does he really have to protect? Racing at the back of the field with an underachieving McLaren, breaking down more often than not, whilst at the same time having to watch his contemporaries fight for world titles. I don't think that's how Fernando wants to be remembered when it's all said and done, and I think that is what motivated his move back to F1 in 2021 and what separates his comeback from Schumi's in 2010. Well guys, there you go. That is my video on Fernando Alonso and Michael Schumacher and comparing their two comebacks. Now let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. I cannot wait to see what you guys think. Let me know about the Michael Schumacher comeback in 2010 and what you think about Fernando's comeback in 2021. Now I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you did, then don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. But guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.